Anyway, just for the benefit of the recording, as they say, we are reading How the Police Overuse Explicit Apology Language to Manage Aspects of Their Identity by Ruth Friskney and published in the Journal of Politeness Research. So, anybody like to kick off?
No.
I think Liz is the obvious person to kick off.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
Nominate me. I never know how to start these things. In
Maybe
the sense
just
of
a
I don't know
summary
what to
of it.
begin with.
Maybe just a summary of.
I mean, I guess the reason I suggested it in the first place is this is the kind of writing I really vibe with, in the sense that it's very approachable. Everything I feel like is really well outlined. It's really obvious what the data is, how it was analysed. There's proper, like, substantive conclusions that come out of it. Let's see, what did I find? I've highlighted so many bits and now my brain's gone blank of what exactly I wanted to even bring up.
Could I suggest that in rather typically, I haven't read it properly, but what I noticed was that it could almost be entitled instead with the phrase apologise if.
Yeah.
Apologise if is the main, and quite rightly, is the main form discussed, isn't it?
Yeah. And she's linking that with sort of what she's saying is the dual role of the police as law enforcement and public service. So I think overall her conclusion or her claim is that apologise if is sort of orienting to the public service angle. Is that other people's understanding?
Or at least there's an attempt to do that. I must admit, it made me think of a moment in my life when somebody said that to me, and I was fuming.
Oh yeah,
because it was. Of course, I'm. Yeah. You know, I think it was something like I apologise if something I did offended you, and it was like, and it was just something that was so obviously an offence.
But that's also, did she make that explicit, that link between the she talks about the service, you know, on the one hand serving the public and you know, not using, or I forgot the wording, but you know, the law enforcement bit where it is maybe more use of force versus the public serving where you wouldn't use sort of force. But I don't think she mentioned it explicitly that it has to do also with these two different two different aspects, the type of apology. Because part of me was wondering still, is this an apology? I don't know, but then I don't know.
What she did say that the if was to do with stuff that hadn't been upheld by the procedure.
Yeah.
But I get it was. I think it. What I mean, to me, the summary that what Jim just said. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of how I understood it. I thought that was very implicit that they did that. That they felt the need to make some kind of apology or apology-like thing because of the public service things, thus showing some attempt to recognise the complaint, you know, the complaint in a face sense made by the civilian.
It's that's very interesting then also, because none of the police officers that were in the focus group thought it was an apology and they laughed at it.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, and I think because they kind of know why it's there, that it. I mean, that was why I thought that it was I mean, I would see it as an apology-like thing, but it's almost like a way of making an apology without admitting any degree of responsibility at all. So essentially, you put the responsibility for being offended on the other person.
exactly.
Mhm.
Which for me means that I would be offended when I got
Yeah.
letter like
Yeah, well,
that.
quite. I mean, and you know, so when
Well,
it actually happened to
it
me, that
may
was one
be.
reaction.
It may be that the recipient of those apologies that, you know, that the police made were not happy about them, but nevertheless, it's an attempt by the police to address, probably, I think what she's saying is you know, to try and appease the addressee. Whether it was successful or not, we don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's not, I mean, I've looked at a few different kinds of public apologies, partly for teaching, and Jeremy Clarkson is well versed in using "I apologise if I offended anybody."
Yeah, one of my students analysed one of his texts once. That she made a very good job of it, I have to say. And looking at exactly
Tony Blair as well, in apologising
yeah.
for the Iraq War, didn't apologise for the Iraq War. He apologised if something or other.
Well,
you know,
if the evidence, or
if that's right, if the
was
information was wrong, I
Yeah.
apologise if the information I received was wrong.
Yeah. But I mean, well, I think one of the key things I wanted to raise about it, and I mean, I thought it was a really interesting paper, and I enjoyed reading it. But one of my slight frustration is I think there's probably something here about if you actually drill down and looked at what was apologised for and what wasn't apologised for, because I think that there is a tendency in this kind of any kind of complaint dealt with, well, probably universities, companies, whatever, to apologise, to make it look like they're making lots of apologies, but never actually apologise for the really key things that are the problems.
That's it.
So they apologise for perhaps things to do with systems, things weren't dealt with, and there was one example of that here, not dealt with as quickly as possible in the way it should have been, but not actually for the real solid thing that was being complained about. And I think that would have been an interesting thing to look at.
Yeah, although she does say at the beginning what specific type of complaint these were apologies for, which I can't remember was precisely where that was.
Well, yeah, but it wasn't. So what I would wanted to see for each incident, what things were apologised for and what things weren't.
Yeah, we only got one, is it, or more? There's certainly one example, because it stuck in my head, about complaining that somebody had been referred to as their partner, not their husband. It stuck in my head because it's just such a ridiculous thing to complain about. But
yeah, indeed.
But there weren't many examples, certainly, were there?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was one where they was an apology for like the slowness of dealing with a complaint, but no apology given for the absolute substance of the complaint. So I mean, my guess would be that you're going to find a pattern largely following that route, that they will apologies are used to do this kind of, making the police look a bit better, having made some sort of errors, but avoiding complaining for things that are material as far as possible.
Yeah.
That would be my guess.
She mentions the breach of procedural matters, and procedure is actually something for which they can be challenged. Institutions can.
Well, it's like universities, isn't it? You can challenge it on
you get them on procedure. Yeah.
So it's a kind of more measurable kind of infringement, the content of matter, where you might have different positions and different views or readings of the situation. But for me, I mean, first of all, I don't know to what extent the Scottish situation is similar or different to that of other nations in the UK. And
I don't think it's that dissimilar.
Right, because I wasn't aware that we have, I mean, that there were recent guidelines issued very recently, she said in the final chat section. But also, I think for me, what was a bit missing was the macro context in which this is taking place. So, you know, all that happened with regards to police mishandling of various kinds of situations, and the way in which police has been challenged to be accountable for their actions, which is very specific to this time. So also this sensitivity to apologies doesn't come out of the blue. Is just to be read in relation to this general anxiety about police overstepping their remit. But I thought it was interesting that there's such a systematic correspondence between apologies, or the nature of
Yeah.
the kind of things they apologize about, and the linguistic structures. That was very surprising to me, because there are no exceptions, basically.
Yeah.
So that, yeah, and then to me, again, I always find very puzzling this thing in Britain when I say sorry with a kind of Japanese attitude to it, which doesn't necessarily mean, oh, I'm desperately sorry, I take responsibility. It means I'm genuinely sorry, emotionally sorry for whatever happened to you.
Regretful kind of thing.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. So if something happens to you, somebody passes away, and I say, I'm sorry about it, and people tend to respond, there's nothing you can do about it. But that to me is a strange kind of response, because that's not the reason I say it, right? So my sorry is generally a kind of an account of my feelings rather than an apology. And while I was reading this, I was wondering to what extent this has now kind of crept in the way that sorry is being used in English, as a kind of, I'm just letting you know that I feel sorry about the situation, but not necessarily taking responsibility for it.
Well, I mean, I would say that was absolutely the case with sorry, and often the way that it is used, particularly in more institutional contexts.
But why do people tend to respond like that then? I always
don't know. I mean,
I think it depends. I think it depends on the context, Bob, because I notice this happens with Southern Africans as well. They use it in the same way that I think you're talking about. I might bump into something and the person I'm with will say, "Oh, sorry." And my first reaction is, well, it wasn't your fault.
Yeah.
But in other contexts, so if somebody, sadly, my cat died recently, and people would say to me, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And in that case, I know that what they're doing is they're expressing their own sadness and their sympathy with me. So I think it depends what the context in which you're saying sorry.
But I think in the kind of situations that are described in this paper, that is precisely where things might get ambiguous, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that was a thing I think she didn't take up, actually, was for me, sorry has no... It didn't surprise me that sorry was used a lot, because a lot of the stuff I've read around particularly institutional apologies, says, and lay users' perceptions of them is that sorry only involves regret and not responsibility.
But sorry was not used a lot, right?
Well, I mean, it was used a reasonable amount.
Okay.
And I mean, there's also stuff to say that
not as much as I apologize.
No, apologise, but it was still quite present. And given the relative formality of the context, one might expect apology to be used, to be really used almost to exclusion of all others.
Yeah.
Because it is. I mean, one thing you can say about the difference between apology and sorry is that there's a difference of register there. And
actually, I was surprised she didn't mention that, because that's what I thought. But she didn't say that, I think. She seemed to be surprised that sorry wasn't used more often. And I thought that's because apology.
Yeah. And but also she never discussed the idea that sorry is not it tends to be less associated with responsibility, and some people reject apologies on that basis. Having said that, there are other people who rejected apologies, other lay responses that rejected the apologise as being too formal and therefore empty. So
there's a mention of page 11. She says, regret and sorry have been suggested to be similar to each other in mean expressions of regret, contrasting with apologise as a form providing an unambiguous offer of apology, and refers to somebody else's work on this.
But it doesn't come through in her general analysis. It's mentioned there, but it doesn't. And there were various points where I thought she could have brought out the idea of using sorry as a way of avoiding. Well,
it would have been interesting as well, just as you get apologise if, you get sorry that. I'm sorry that this happened to you.
Yeah.
Which is not the same as I'm sorry I did it to you.
Yes.
I
Because
think it's
yeah,
going
sorry,
to.
if, right? Sorry, Jim.
Sorry, I was going to say, I just think it depends on the wider context, doesn't it? I mean, you could say, you know, hang on, one of the examples here, the one where I think it's the first one of the first ones, yeah. I apologize too for our failure to deal with this matter. Well, if you had, I'm sorry for our failure to deal with this matter, then you know, because of our failure, I think it would be include there for a recognition of responsibility, wouldn't it? I would say so because of the word because of the phrase our failure. No.
But if you had, I apologise if we failed, that
yeah,
changes
that
the
would be
meaning.
different.
Yeah.
Again, yes, that would be different, of course. If I mean, personally, I find it, yeah, apologise if, I think, I find it offensive too, because it seems to, it's sort of denying the credibility of the addressee.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, if you look at the cases where we have apologized if,
Wasn't that partner example?
the very first one, what a giveaway, because it said, I would like to apologize if, as is clear in this case. So there's no if, it's clear in this case, yeah?
Yes.
Why not say it would, you know, I would like to apologize apologize that you felt the officer's actions were not professional. It's the same later on. What I mean is just getting rid of the if would not, because of the context, would not actually be admitting responsibility for a complaint that hasn't been substantiated. Yeah. Look at the one at the top of page 11. I cannot find fault with the police officer who used the term, but nevertheless, I offer my apologies that it caused you upset or offense. I mean, that must be the case, but, you know, but they've already denied that, you know, the any upholding of the complaint. They've already done that in the context there. So I find the if very insulting somehow.
It's interesting because you said that it denies the addressee's responsibility, credibility, but at the same time, it's saying it doesn't matter if nobody else finds fault with this. I acknowledge that you do, and that's what matters on this occasion. So that's what I
but
wish to acknowledge.
But wouldn't that have, instead of if, have the same effect? No.
Yeah, because I mean that's not about credibility. It's about, you know, your dignity as a human being.
Oh yeah. Yes, I get that bit. Yes, I mean, yeah.
So it does both at the same time. It's potentially
recognizing. Yeah, it's a recognition of this person's concern. Yeah, of the addressee's concern.
Yeah.
It's just the if is rather sort of belittling that concern. You could say.
Yeah, it's like a you know, just lip service too.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it would be better, wouldn't it? If, well, it would for me anyway, if it was addressed to me, to say, oh, I'm really sorry you feel that way, but this is our side of it, kind of thing. But I think that, and I'm not sure whether she's kind of trying to touch on that in this paper, that the word apology is used because of the connotations of formally taking responsibility, even if it's not, even if the wording in the end is not taking any responsibility. The word, because people very often say, I just want an apology. And it's the performative kind of function of I apologize and an apology that is kind of quite powerful here. And that's why the word apology is being used instead of sorry, I would say.
Yeah. Yes, it's a sort of, as we said before, it's very formal. It's on record, as it were. Yeah. but I still don't see why the same thing can't be achieved with that, given that at least in these examples, you have in both of the cases that we've seen here, as part of the co-text, you have a denial of the of the legitimacy of the complaint.
Yeah.
So that it is a question of the complainant's feelings.
Yeah.
So why not acknowledge that it is their feelings rather than saying
Yeah.
maybe it's your
But that's maybe the advice that these people that write the policy documents need.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
quite often, I mean, I've seen not this, but I can't remember, but other documents where there'll be some advice given in a public body about using some speech act or other. I'm trying to think of what it was, but without any analysis of what it actually, how that speech act is enacted, you know, and I think that's what's happened here in these guidelines. So maybe the police have been advised to apologise without any knowledge or analysis of how, what form that should take, how it would be received, whether it's apologise, sorry, you know, what are you, all those kinds of things. So that's kind of what she's trying to do, isn't it? To sort of say, well, we need more detail before we can advise people on
Yes.
what to say.
It's always the case, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's so often the case.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, people want a simple recipe.
Oh, thanking. I'm always banging on about thanking. That's when you're seeing guidance to managers. Oh, always thank your workforce. Well, right. Well, yeah. When, where, how? It doesn't. You know, sometimes it's patronising to thank people. You know. So.
Oh yes.
Very.
I mean, there's also there was an example on page 16. And so the quote from the letter says, having considered the circumstances, I cannot find fault with the police officer who used this term, but nevertheless, I offer my apologies.
Yeah.
But then you get that thing about it's not the format for apology, is it?
Yeah, no. Yeah.
Because I mean, so that was another Christopher Blair that he didn't say I apologise for. And avoiding that. So in that other example you gave, Jim, about our failure, so this a use of nominalizations to distance, so that so failure, who did the failing, you know, and so not.
Yeah. She talks about making it impersonal, doesn't she?
Yeah, she does.
Instructions where there's no person involved.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was, you know, in a lot of ways, it was evident to me this person probably isn't a specialized linguist discourse analyst.
No,
but there wasn't quite that detail of it. I mean, there were a couple of points where they were really. There was a couple of points where I thought, yeah, that bit's really nice. But I mean, you know, I also know how difficult that is to kind of step over disciplinary boundaries, and I think she makes a very good job of it. But I suppose as a discourse analyst, they're just other little questions I would want answered. But then, having said that, I felt about a lot, you know, a lot of paper. But yeah, but I mean, I thought she obviously knows the literature well, and is really engaged with it. But perhaps just doesn't have quite that broader knowledge of linguistics or discourse analysis would enable her just to get into that a little bit further.
It is practically oriented, isn't it? Yeah.
And that, you know, there's no. I don't think, you know, there's any problem. Yeah, I don't have a problem with that at all. I think it's really, but you know, but she's obviously taking, you know, the linguistic side of it really, you know, really strong. Because sometimes you see stuff. I mean, okay, and it probably wouldn't get published in a journal like ours, but where they claim to be using some linguistic model, and you look at it and you think, no, you're not really. Whereas this, you know, this really does. But yeah, that just a slight lack of experience kind of just comes out, you know, is evident in a few places.
Yeah. Yes.
Elizabeth, do you know how she managed to get hold of the focus group, the people, the police officers.
She
But
works for a massive project in a huge sort of multidisciplinary team. I remember she showed me the website, but I was actually just Googling her because I can't for the life of me remember what the website
was a
was.
PhD
But it was
project,
a
was it?
huge, like lots of different research groups all working together on different aspects of police communication. So she's got like a lot of backup in that regard.
Yeah, so they're
But
probably
I'm
more
damned if
macro
I can
level.
remember what the project was called.
Do
It's
you
very-
know? Sorry.
Sorry.
Do you know, Liz, when the data was collected? I don't think it was mentioned.
Yeah, it was
2010.
mentioned. It was,
Was it?
yeah,
I'm so
2010.
Yeah.
2010. Because she does, and actually I have to also apologize because she does make that link. I was saying she wasn't making explicit. She does make it explicit on page 20.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think obviously this broader project she's part of obviously has more macro levels with the police. So often mere linguists like us don't get to kind of call on, it'd be like trying to get access to the NHS or something like that. That you would need those higher level links, right? That as an individual, as a linguist, it's very hard to be taken seriously on that kind of level.
Would have loved to
so-
have more details about how they approach the police.
Well, I think that the links are already there, so therefore they can just exploit them. They're obviously, but probably already a trusted entity that engages with the police on a regular basis.
Yeah, she's part of the Scottish Centre for Crime and Justice Research. That's what her affiliation is.
Yeah.
So presumably they'll already have established links.
Yeah, it was a whacking great it wasn't even just one, what's the word, like branch of the police. It was like multiple different branches across the UK and different teams associated with different branches.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So, I think for any one of us just to approach the police, say, "Oh, can I have some data, please?" You wouldn't rate your chances very highly, would you?
I'd rate my chances. My dad's an ex-police officer.
Oh, right. Okay.
There has to be something in it for that. I mean, my colleague Dave Peplow is doing some work on well, it's more prisons than police actually. It's parole board hearings. But I think he's collaborating with somebody from sociology, but they've got like the parole boards want something out of it kind of thing. But I don't know how they first got access, who approached who. But
I was actually trying to remember who it was that presented on this. I think it was about parole boards and how they come to their decisions at a sociolinguistic symposium recently.
That'll be Dave, and I can't remember the name of his colleague. Yeah.
What's his name? Because I was trying to retrieve. Pardon?
Peplow.
Peplow. I was trying to retrieve it was a really good presentation. And again, I was shocked by, the amount of stuff that he had been given us access to.
Yeah. I know it's great.
Nature of those, the decision-making process records and amazing stuff.
Well, if you want me to put you in touch with him.
I can look up I'm sure they've published about it. I just remembered this morning and I couldn't remember where I heard it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that'll be there.
Brilliant presentation.
Yeah, I imagine it's a very interesting thing to look at because because obviously because it's all about the offender trying to present themselves in a very particular way in order to convince the parole board. Because there was a series relatively recently on the BBC which had excerpts from, and it was really interesting to see what was obviously you only got a very small
edited.
A very heavily edited version of the, something like a 3-hour meeting or something like that. And you probably only saw about, I don't know, 5 minutes of actual clips if you put them all together, because there were 2 cases dealt with in each program over an hour. But yeah, which ones they gave the nod to be allowed out, and the ones they didn't. And as a linguist, when I was listening, I was trying to unpick how are they trying to judge the sincerity or the likelihood Yeah, I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah, those are exactly the kind of things that Dave and his colleague are looking at, I think.
Yeah, you know, I must admit, I watched it and thought, I think I'm really glad I'm not the person trying to make those decisions, because, yeah, it's, you know, just incredibly difficult to unpick.
I think one of the things the parole board were specifically interested in, I seem to remember him saying, was the difference between in-person and online meetings.
Right. Yeah.
And if their decision making was, you know,
affected,
similar in both cases.
Yeah. I mean, all the ones I saw were online. You know, this program, because when this program was done, or they were all being carried out online. So I guess they want to know whether they basically can continue to do it in that way.
Yeah.
Because I guess it's a lot cheaper for them, rather than having to send people around, you know, around the country to be physically present at meetings. Yeah. Well, I suppose it'd be, you know, interesting. You could do an interesting comparison with PhD vivas as well.
Yeah.
Less high stakes on the whole. But
yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, it is an interesting question about how do those, you know, is there a difference between an online viva and a in-person one?
But the issue of sincerity is what we seem to have picked on for this paper as well.
But it's always the key issue with apologies, isn't it? I mean, that's the thing that people always pick up on. You know, is it sincere or not? That's the critical thing. If you look at any sort of, I think, assessments of apologies generally, but, you know, particularly institutional apologies, there is this kind of, you know, innate suspicion, I think.
That it's not.
Public. That they're just doing it for the sake of
just words.
That they're trying to kind of, you know, sort of show themselves to be that thing about going through the motions of acknowledging a complaint but not really doing so.
I don't know if that's the whole thing for me, at least, because I think you know, thinking about various issues I have with the institution I work in, and knowing, you know, how dysfunctional their HR services are, for example, I don't quite care if they're sincere or not. I do care that an apology is recorded.
Yeah, I agree. To me, and how do you how do you measure or calculate sincerity? Because it's an
institution, right? It's
or
not
well, even in an individual. I mean,
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Maybe it's worth asking, when you talk about sincerity with an apology, exactly what is the sincerity about? What does it relate to?
Yeah,
I mean, what makes an apology? What makes an apology sincere, would you say?
Yes, I mean, it's either whether you are thinking about, you know, that person or that institution's genuine intent, or whether it's a kind of it's a felicitous realization of an act of acknowledging responsibilities in some form or another, which is
you're kind of making the distinction that division you have made relates to Austinian definitions of apology, where sincerity is demanded, whereas with Searle, it's you go through the motions of you go through the motions a bit of being sincere, but there is no, you know, that you don't actually need to be sincere for the apology to work. So it depends which, like, you know, which side of that line you fall on, I suppose, as a linguist or a speech act analyst, and or as a lay person, of course. And of course, those two things are, we are both. You can't entirely divide those two things.
Yeah.
So what would Searle's sincerity condition be then for an act of apology? How would you express the sincerity condition in a Searlean framework?
Well, in a Searlean framework, but in the Searlean framework, that you basically create an apology, and that by using that apology, you are being sincere. There's no test really.
Well, yeah, sure. As we said, it's performative. Yeah.
That it's recognizable and conventional and
Yeah,
Well,
something
that
like that.
sounds
But
like-
but,
that
but there's
sounds like the
absolutely
essential
no need for it
condition.
to. But in the
Yeah.
Searle framework, it is assumed to be sincere.
that
There is
seem to be,
no
yeah.
there
yeah.
is no judgment of sincerity there.
Yeah.
Whereas with Austin, there is an implicit judgment of sincerity there. Whereas Searle, there is not.
Mm.
I mean, which you can say, because actually there is no way. I mean, none of us can judge whether
Yeah.
somebody else is being sincere or not. That because that's go back to intentions, and you can't see inside somebody, anybody's head to check what their true intentions are. So essentially, Searle is putting that aside, whereas for Austin, that's a key part of the, of the felicity conditions.
Mm.
I still don't see what Searle's sincerity condition would be for the speech act of an apology then.
Well, he just says it's assumed. Basically, he says it's assumed to be sincere. That's it.
Mm.
I'd have to dig a bit further to get the precise wording, but that is the.
I see. Yeah. I'm looking at these other examples. Yeah.
That just by using that kind of thing, it is assumed to be sincere. So there is no.
By virtue of having been uttered, or
By virtue of having produced, that it is deemed to be sincere in itself, and then no querying of that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, depending on how an apology is, as we've seen, depending on how it is uttered, it could be maybe the sincerity could simply be taking responsibility, recognizing one's failure, and yeah, just performing it, as you say. Maybe it's a lie, maybe you don't feel that, but it would have to include that.
Yeah, I think
maybe that explains some of the if.
Or for, maybe, I apologise for something.
I apologise for my whatever, or for our, as in that example where it was our failure, wasn't it?
I noticed when teaching about apologies with students and looking at celebrity apologies, quite often they would assume insincerity because they are celebrity, and they would say things like, well, they're only saying it for the sake of their career, regardless of the form of it.
Yeah, or that's what they've been told to say, or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
We used to do I don't know, Liz, do you remember it? I don't know, because I think it was Derek's material, or Derek who got it originally. We were doing sort of speech acts and pragmatics, and look at that extract from A Fish Called Wanda, when the John Cleese character is being held by his ankles upside down.
I love that film.
A first floor window, and what was the name of the villain? Otto. Otto is demanding an apology for calling him stupid, and he does. He said, "I'm trying to remember it now. I do. I apologize unreservedly." And then Otto says, "You're really sorry?" So at first, Otto just wants the performative. After all, you've insulted me, calling me stupid, so on. But then he wants an expression of sincere regret. And it's like they're different things, almost. And perhaps there's an element of, there always is that thing with apology.
Yeah, well, as I said, when I was researching, doing institutional apologies, you found kind of reports from lay people those who wanted the formal "I apologise" and those who thought sorry was better because it was more personal and not so formulaic. So, but but then there were people who didn't like sorry because it only showed regret and not necessarily responsibility.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I actually. No, sorry. I wanted to say I have another unrelated question about the paper, and this has to do with the public apologies. Like, to me, there is I don't know. At first I was like, oh, so they're not public apologies, and then she said, no, they are public apologies because they are you know,
Mm.
share these, or this is like a public institution. But I still wonder whether it's like, to what extent it's the same as different types of, like, whether you can have different types, therefore, of public apologies.
It's a really interesting question. I noticed that.
Yeah, I did
It
too.
brings up this thing. I mean, it's effectively public in the sense that because it's written down, it's on record, and especially if it's been communicated electronically, it can therefore be potentially circulated very widely indeed. I mean, you know, it's the same problem we have with emails, almost, isn't it? You know?
Yeah.
That, I mean, you know, canonically they are private.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I see them as private, even though I know, like,
Yeah.
They're not.
exactly.
Well, I mean,
But yeah, the
they
police is
are.
aware of this, of course. I mean,
yeah. Well, certainly not emails from your university account are not private. You might make a different argument, I suppose, for those from a personal email account.
But are we talking should or is here?
Well, I don't know, because you know, nobody has ever nobody has ever asked me for contents of my personal email, whereas I have been asked for contents of my, my university email.
I thought that they can just check that themselves if they want to. They don't even need to ask permission. I think someone told me at the University of Sheffield that was the case, at least.
That wouldn't surprise me. I mean, we have to provide them for things like appeal cases. We might be asked to provide any emails we've had with the student or about the student with other members of staff. But I don't think they could ask for that if you had, well, I mean, you shouldn't be doing that stuff on your personal email anyway, but, you know. But it's up to us to provide. I mean, I suppose in theory they could go in and see what I've written in my emails, but I think that's probably very unlikely unless they had a very good reason to do so, just because of the work involved. But yeah, so it's, I mean, I think with this whole public-private, there are layers of these things, aren't they? And particularly in the digital world, that boundary is not very clear, necessarily very clear. So, well, I mean, the canonical, obvious stuff like, Facebook, for example, that you might have things set to private, but we've recently been sent a social media usage policy for staff. So about essentially beware what you say on any of these things, regardless of whether it's from an institutional or a private account. Essentially, that's what it comes to.
Fear, a climate of fear. Yes, I know.
Yeah. So yeah, it is. But I mean, I also think this is public because you're dealing with an institution.
Yeah, I mean, to go back to maybe what Isabel was asking about in this case, the thing is, presumably the addressee would like to feel that the apology or whatever, or the brush off or whatever it is addressed to them personally and not to the public at large. Yeah. It's a participation framework issue, really, isn't it? There is only one addressee here in each case, and in that sense, it's personal rather than public. The police are not or shouldn't be making an announcement, as it were, and yet, as I say, the addressee can forward this to whoever they want to, and to Ruth Friskney and other researchers or whatever.
Yeah. Although
or complain to contact their local newspaper or or whatever it might be. So yeah, it's and it's a sort of thing that could be Freedom of Information Act.
Yeah.
Anything, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So yeah, it's certainly not absolutely private. It's an email to an individual, but within in a public sphere, I suppose.
The writers have to be aware of overhearers.
Yes, yeah. There are potentially multiple overhearers, both within their institution and outside their institution. Yeah. So even though it looks like a not quite a one-to-one email, but yeah, that it has to be designed for an audience beyond its recipient.
Yeah. Yes.
On
That it
the
could be, yeah, they could,
public-private debate, I sort of find it interesting that the police did redact personal and identifying information. So they obviously don't consider the whole content of the email fully public. Otherwise,
well,
they wouldn't
yeah,
have bothered to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it was, you
Yeah.
know, if all the press or everyone already knew exactly who the people involved were, etc., etc., there would be no need to redact that identifying information of either the officers or the people involved.
Yeah.
although there's a difference between what the recipient of that letter can do with it, what the
That's what I was
institution
thinking.
can do with it,
Yeah,
as compared to how the institution handles data that involves other people. That will
exactly.
be GDPR regulations.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I just don't know that I would have categorized them as public apologies, given that they have to be redacted.
I mean, yeah, but as I say, I think when you get into the gradations of public, they have to write it as though they're public,
Yeah,
even if at one level they're private.
yeah, yeah, it's interesting.
Mm.
But I mean, you know, that's probably true for any email I write to a student or, you know, or another member of staff. I have to basically write them like that. You know, I have to always be aware that should there be a problem, you know, and one, you know, when one is writing, well, sometimes when one is writing an email, one is very, very aware of you are dealing with a delicate situation and be very careful how you put it. But in many, many cases, you don't know that what something you were just writing a quick email to might be the subject of an appeal 2 years down the line. Or some disciplinary critique or whatever. You don't know. I mean, you know, interestingly, with this social media policy that I was saying about, you know, this has basically been told that, you know, I mean, okay, I've been employed at the University of Leeds well before things like Facebook or social media existed, but say, you know, that somebody could be taken to task for something that they put on Facebook before they were a University of Leeds employee. So it's not just about what's posted during their position at the university, but applies to their whole digital life, essentially.
Yuck.
Is a, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Which, you know, for somebody who has been a, you know, a working professional during all that time, is probably less of an issue than somebody who's grown up with that media. I mean, yeah, I certainly know of people who basically, when they got to the point where they were looking for work, just deleted all their social media.
Yes, modern living, eh?
Absolutely.
We're at nearly at 2 o'clock. Is there anything anybody else wanted to contribute about the paper? Particularly, perhaps.
I have just one point which may come across as very pernickety, but
Surely not.
but it is okay. It's a bee in my bonnet, but and I'm just taking one example here. So the fact that it's a criticism of something in this paper is not personal in a sense, because you get it all over the place, and it rather annoys me. It's about citations. And the example I've got is on page 4 of the page 4 of the online version here, and that where the new paragraph begins on page 4. The sentence reads, "The complexities of institutional apologies raise particular issues where approaches to apology focus on the recipient's experience. For example, Watts 2003. Now, what is being attributed to Watts 2003 here, do you think?
I don't know where you are, page 4.
What page did you say?
No, it's actually page 5, at the bottom of page 5 for me.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Whatever the one I'm looking at, it says page 4 of 18.
Bottom of page 5 for me too. Thanks,
Yeah.
Isabel.
I'm sorry. Yes. Okay. It's round about 1, 2, 3, 4. I think it's the 5th paragraph of section 1.3. Is it?
1.3. Sorry, how does the paragraph start?
The
The
complexity.
complexities,
Complexities.
the complexities.
Yes.
I think there were a few places in this paper where I had that kind of, there was a couple of places where I was cited and thinking, I don't think I really dealt with that particular thing. So,
Yes.
or only in a very kind of, orthogonal kind of way. So yes, I do know what you mean, because Watts isn't specifically about anything institutional.
Mm.
And I don't say he says an awful lot about apologies actually in that. I assume that's the book, isn't it, of Watts 2003?
It is that is I
Yeah.
looked down thinking, is there another Watts 2003 I don't know about, but it is the book, right? And so well, I would have thought that in a case like this, and this is what I often feel, that if you're going to give me some particular citation of a book, I want
Give me a page number.
I
Yeah,
want page
absolutely.
number, you
Yeah.
know?
But also in
And-
articles, sometimes articles are long. You want to, for
yeah,
specific
even in
claims to
articles sometimes, yeah. And I'm guessing, and I'm thinking, well, actually, to see how much Watts 2003 says about apologies at all.
Can't remember it saying much.
No, I can't. But
Hang on, I'm looking up the index.
Well,
let's
indexes
have a look.
depend a lot on the publisher as much as the.
Yeah, there's no there's no entry in the index for apologies. I assume, I'm guessing therefore, that this citation is thrown in just as the example. The e.g. is a work which focuses on the recipient's experience.
yeah.
But it's I find it misleading, and as I say, it's not nothing particular about this paper. You get that an awful lot of the time, and it really irritates me, and I think it's misleading. I wish people would stop it.
agree.
Yeah, because you think, this
Sorry.
way, because if it's something you don't know, you might think, I ought to look at that, and then you go looking, you think I've just wasted my time.
Yeah.
Can't find anything from that at all. Yeah, I mean that has happened to me before now.
I think that should become a guideline for the journals in the journals.
Maybe actually that's an idea. I never thought of that. Maybe we should actually sort of write it in. Yeah.
Have we wandered into a discussion about the journal?
We have. It's pretty good, isn't it?
As opposed to this particular paper.
Yes.
I could. I'm conscious that people don't have to speak, but in case Laura or Evanthia or Jerry have been of anything burning they want to say as well.
Not really. I found this discussion very interesting. I'm also working on apologies and influencers apologies, actually. And yes, sincerity is an issue that is discussed a lot in the comment section. Most of these apologies are not considered sincere by the influencers' followers or everyone who watches their videos. And yes, sometimes it seems that I'm sorry is just taken as an account of feelings and nothing more than that. Yeah, I think it's very interesting. It's not institutional apologies that I'm looking at, but still I think that it's a rule of thumb that I'm sorry is very formulaic now, and yeah.
And apparently are tears in front of the cameras as you apologize.
A lot of tears.
And bowing in Japan, of course.
Bowing, right,
90-degree bowing.
It's so it's really emphasizing the performative, isn't it? Both of them.
Yeah.
The whole body performance.
But at the same time, I also watched another video by an influencer rating other influencers' apologies, in which he said that you should not use "I apologize" because this is very formal, and usually influencers do not address their following in such a formal way. So this might cause other problems.
There's a kind of alien register, or register alien to them. That's a good point.
Yeah.
You have to be in style, as it were, right? For it to count.
I guess that no matter what you do, if your apology is only done for the sake of not losing more followers, the people will know and they will criticize it.
Yeah, or they think they know. But
Mm.
Or they think they know. Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
I would be interested in a follow-up with a quantitative measure, in fact, because of course we are bound to see variation on this, right? And then we can always find a case that doesn't conform to whatever rule we observe, but there has to be a kind of measurable distribution of, you know, how many of these apologies are believed and are perceived to count
Yeah.
apologies, and
Yeah.
how many are deemed to be insincere.
Again, you know, what does believed mean?
Yeah,
you mean
yeah,
you're
yeah,
talking about
yeah, yeah.
sincerity again? I mean, in some cases we know, and perhaps we should have. That's the other thing we should have, is that context. Is if somebody says, "I just want an apology," then presumably the equivalent of "I apologize" would be ideal, and the issue of the apologizer's quote mark sincerity doesn't really come into it, does it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think you always. I mean, a bit difference with the influencers, but with institutions, it's, you know, the person writing the letter and doing the apology is not usually the person who's actually caused the offence. So you've already got resistance, which I think, you know, has an impact too. So
well, that's interesting. Did they? I didn't notice that. The example she gave, was it we or I? That, you know, was it we or I? I can't remember. I've closed it now.
I think it was I for quite a bit of for quite a few examples.
Yeah, but even so, it's sort of you know, it's not, you're not necessarily, you're not dealing with a particular officer who caused you the issue.
Yeah.
So even if it's I, it's not that person. It's an on behalf of.
Yeah.
It's true.
So on the page 11 example, I regret the actions of this officer and apologize for the poor service.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does anybody know, has anybody looked up that study by Deutschmann 2003 they reference with a large-scale British National Corpus material? Because I found it interesting that this large-scale study got exactly the same amount of instances of regret and sorry, although the scale is really different.
That was interesting, yeah.
But I haven't looked up the.
No, I've never looked at that. I suspect it's probably not desperately easy to get hold of.